Hello all. In this video I'll be looking at the Hongdui MT-2465 Pro Combination T-Square, a collaboration with Dennis from Hooked on Wood and supplied to me by Banggood for this review. This is a combination T-Square because obviously it will T-square, it will line mark from the central adjustable marking guides as well as from any one of the 650 1mm holes on each side of the rule. It will drill guide up to 2 holes at a time as standard with 3, 4, 5 and 6mm bushings, and if more were needed it will trammel, giving you the ability to mark up to a 1300mm diameter, all for £25. No, I'm only joking. This is a premium tool and priced as such, so first off I wanted to make sure I showed you how well this thing is packed and maybe reassure you it has every chance of arriving intact should you decide to part with your hard earned. Double boxed with a heavy corrugated outer box and inside a cardboard box with cut foam protecting the tool from all sides. And as is often said with a tool carrying the Hongdui name, what an incredible tool it looks. Removed from the box it looks and feels special, but is it? Well, we'll get to that. We'll also get to upcoming Banggood June sale dates which might get you significantly better deals on this and other woodworking tools, so stick around for more on that toward the end. In the box is included an instruction book. You get the T-square itself and 2 drill guide sets with, as mentioned, 3, 4, 5 and 6mm drill guide bushes. The stock and ruler are aluminium, beautifully finished in silver and red anodizing respectively, all edges nicely softened for comfortable handling. Making this a combination T-ruler, the hollowed centre of the ruler itself features several movable guides and accessories. 2 of these with brass coloured thumb screws are for pencil marking. 2 with stainless thumb screws are drill guides. These all feature a pointer or cursor either side for positioning to the scale on the ruler. The 5th guide, or accessory, is for a very fine pin for use as a pivot for circle drawing, able to be used anywhere along the ruler but probably most useful left against the stock as is. Flipped over, you'll notice there's a scale on the rear, though not to the rule edge, and a quick release for removing the stock. You can see on the stock there, it's subtly marked with the Hooked on Wood logo along with Hongdui's own. Zooming in here, you can make out the 1mm hole in the central movable marking guide. You can also see the scale runs right to the rule edge. The 1mm marking holes on the rule are in 1mm increments. A nice touch is that every 5 and 10mm increment is on a central row of holes so they can be quickly identified. All the in-between scale marking holes run on a diagonal line between them. I find the white on red makes the scale pretty easy to read too. According to Dennis at Hooked on Wood, the holes were originally 0.5mm. But he found it broke leads too easily, so requested 1mm holes. They still break the leads of a mechanical pencil sometimes, but this is lessened in the larger holes, and it does at least give you the option of using a 0.7 or 1mm leads in mechanical pencils as well. Both the pencil marking guides and the drill guides have the scale cursor each side, but the drilling guides also have these pointers to centre cue up to a marked line. All the guides move nice and freely within the rule once loosened, which makes setting on the mark nice and easy. The stainless steel drill bushes, as is common, just unscrew for changeover. To remove a guide or change its position, you just unscrew the thumb screw fully and disassemble. We'll see that a bit later. The stock then is removable, and this is made easy via the quick release lever on the underside. Both pieces are a very close machined fit. You can see how nicely it's all put together and machined, and how it works. How the 2 locking clamp positions lock or release the parts with a quarter turn. Now, one thing Dennis mentioned was that this quick release was an improvement over the original fixing, meaning it could be repeatedly separated and put back together reliably square each time. See, I'm not so sure about that. You can maybe just make out there a fraction of side to side play ruler to stock. If we look at the locking mechanism again, it's one that pulls the parts together, say from top to bottom, but it doesn't also pull the ruler to the reference edge of the stock, something that would ensure square mating every time. In fairness, it does seem to mate square fairly reliably for me, but I would absolutely check it each time. Just to note, as it caught me out the first couple of times, the quick release lever has a smooth side and a sort of machined hollowed side. If you try and lock with the smooth side facing out, it won't. The machined side has to be facing up, or out if you like, to lock down, as this has the fat side of the cam. One of the uses it states for the removed stock, by the way, is for setting a table saw to a 45. Don't know if I'd ever bother with that, but thought it best to show it as the book does. To demonstrate the wiggle room, I've purposely attached the stock on the rule as biased to one side as they'd go, and using my large reference triangle here can show you the difference it makes. you can just see there the T-square ruler is a fraction off at 400mm. Now I'm one that goes along with the saying that if you can't make it accurate, make it adjustable. So this tiny amount of play could be seen as a good thing. I just wanted to point it out as I'm pretty sure Dennis claimed it would default to square, and I don't agree. You could well make these pieces slightly off if you weren't careful. On that point, Dennis mentioned that not everyone has a large reference to reset it square every time, hence why he thought the supposedly self-aligning design was good. May well be the case, but I kind of find it hard to believe someone who might invest in this would be without the means to provide a reference. Even so, if that is the case, I guess you could lay out dogs on an MFT if you have one, as here. As long as your bench holes are still a good fit and your dog's clean and unblemished, it should provide you a good reference. You could also perhaps use a guide rail and rail square, making sure the rail square is standing proud of the end of the rail. This will give you a more reliable reference for the stock than the end of the guide rail. The ruler you could then check against the runners on the rail itself. If it needs adjusting, as here, release the lever, set, then lock. Because the locking lever spins, it might take a couple of attempts to get everything aligned and locked. The MFT way, you can seat the T-square upside down, making it a little easier. Of course, if you do have a large square or triangle, it makes things much easier. This one I reviewed recently, by the way, which I'll make sure pops up at the end. A good candidate maybe for a June sale purchase. Happy to report that, using my precision straight edge as a reference, both edges of the ruler matched it perfectly, as did the stock itself. That's good to see given the hollow ruler. One of Dennis's recommendations to Hongdui in fact was to have 4 guides inside the ruler to support it, eliminating a squish effect. They work well in that regard, keeping the thing nice and rigid. So I've got a bit of ply here and I'm using the large triangle to make a central line. Flipped over so we know it's 90 to the edge and all is square. I then carefully line up the T-square to that line to see if there's any deviation. And thankfully there isn't. This is checked from both sides of the T-square, of course. I also did a couple of parallel lines either side of the central one, something I like to do just to visually check all looks parallel and good. I even repeated going over a new triangle line too, just to make sure there's no flukes here. Both appear nice and square. At the very least then, it can T-square like a champ. Besides its generous 650mm length, this T-square starts to separate itself from the pack when you start to use its other features. I've set the central marking guides here more or less as close as you can get them, about 20mm apart at 100 and 120mm. I'm using a 0.7mm rot ring mechanical pencil. I didn't have much luck with the 0.5 initially, likely as in this direction it's cross-grained. These are 1mm holes, remember. In his overview of this tool, Dennis mentioned that the original 0.5mm holes continually broke the leads as not only were they small at 0.5, but that the hole gave no room for wiggle for any allowance as you moved, breaking the leads constantly. That makes sense, but as you can see, I still get lead breaks, even trying to keep the pencil as steady and as vertical as I can. In my experience, this isn't unusual with tools with the mechanical pencil marking holes. You have a little more success marking something smooth surfaced like MDF or melamine face board, but anything a bit more woody, like this ply, expect lead breaks. The 1mm holes may well allow a very fine tipped awl through though. This might make a more reliable option on materials more wood grainy, allowing you to lightly scratch rather than pencil mark. So I went over the lines made with the central guides with the holes at 100 and 120mm on the ruler itself. Looking a little more closely, you can see the lines have overlaid each other very well, but you can also see the number of stops and starts thanks to the lead breaks. I should say that although this is a used bit of ply, it was recut for square edges and lightly sanded to smooth out the face a little for marking. How accurate the central guides are compared to those machined into the rule is entirely down to you. The cursor, exactly centre of the scale mark, does seem to match very well with those machined into the rule. A slightly finer point on the cursor might make dialing it in a bit easier, I think. With the tape measure laid over, you should be able to see my lines are accurate, exactly at 100 and 120mm. Guides in the same position, I intersect the lines I've just done, creating a little 20mm square. As I'm going with the grain, I try out the 0.5mm mechanical pencil, and even though I still got a lead break, it was only one and a perfect little square result nonetheless. I'm going to use the corners of that square as my marks to drill. Being close to the end of the rule, it presents a good opportunity to show you how easy the guides are to disassemble and rearrange to suit. Just undo the thumb screws fully, lift off the cursors and lift the rule to release the bottom parts. Now I can slide my drill guides to the 100 and 120mm spots. Well, one of them at least. As the drill guides have the central pointer I showed earlier, they won't quite butt up to each other at 20mm. They need about 25mm between them. That's alright though, as for the purposes of review, this all contributes to what I think is valuable info. So again, for each drill guide, a 3, 4, 5 and 6mm bushing is provided in what appears to be stainless steel. I'm swapping to the 5mm for no other reason than I already had a 5mm drill bit in my drill. Cursor lined up to the 100mm mark, it's ready to position for drilling the first 2 holes. That's where the machine pointer in the rule centre comes in handy. Using the other drill guide for posterity, I back off the one I've just used, positioning the second at 120mm. Align to the horizontal line and drill. Align to the second hole and drill. So that appears to have worked very nicely. 4 5mm holes in a square at 20mm centres. I have to say, in reviews I hear a lot of claims about this sort of drill guide for hand drilling. They're okay and will help you do a relatively straight hole, but they won't be perfect unless you are. You can see my drill bit has a slight gap to the square at the top on the left, in 2 different holes. And it doesn't matter what brand your guide is, as it's down to the drill bits themselves. You'll find the cutting edges at the very tip of the drill bit are a perfect fit in the bushings. You'll hear them scratch around the inside as you turn it in the bushing. Slide it through a little more and you'll notice some wiggle. The cutting tip is machined perfectly to size, while the shaft, whose main job is clearing debris, is a tiny fraction smaller. Brad point and HSS twist bits are pretty much all like this. I use a mix of HSS twist bits from Bosch and Famag, and they both have that fraction clearance. I'm just trying to manage your expectations really. These guides are great for spot marking your holes, but they're only a guide. You will still have to try and drill straight if you want a straight hole. To access the last function, that being a trammel, I'll need to remove the stock from the T-square so we can use the pin that lives at the stock end of the rule. Can you just see it there? It's a really fine pin, which is great as it turns out. It has its own thumb screw to retract it fully or to alter its depth. I mark an arbitrary cross on one of the central lines I made earlier. One of the improvements of the original Dennis requested was the inclusion of a clear plastic carrier for the pin, this to help you spot it into position. To be honest, the pin is so fine I really struggled to spot it through the plastic, but I could at least see the cross and intuitively match it to where I thought the pin was. The best way to align it, I think, if the situation allows you fairly long vertical and horizontal lines, is to use the central cursors on the drill guides on the vertical line. Then line up the stock end of the rule to the horizontal line. The pinpoint is right on this line, fully butted up like here, so this method would centre it perfectly each time. Then you just screw down the pin, providing you a pivot point. The pin being so thin pushes into the wood really easily and leaves a very discreet mark. Anyway, with mine set, I set one of my marking guides to make a sweeping curve. Then move the guide 30mm down and draw a second. The thing pivots absolutely beautifully. I've tried a couple of Trammels from Banggood and they've been rubbish. Usually complicated to set and read and with very intrusive pivots. This one however is super simple to set, is accurate and works as well as I'd want it to. Just lovely. There I have my 2 sweeping curves at precisely 390mm and 360mm where I set them to be. And of course, given the room, you could do full circles, potentially up to 1300mm in diameter if you used the rule holes, more like 1280 max with the marking guide I think. This combination T-square then is a hell of a tool. I think it would lend itself really well to the work of fitters and cabinet makers in particular, but general shop work too, given the variety of such work. At some points I've probably sounded a bit harsh, like with being unconvinced it will self-align when brought back together, but it does so more than not as demonstrated here. I would never put it back together and not check though. Beautifully machined as it is, which helps, the locking mechanism isn't a self-aligning one. Fair play to Dennis though from Hooked on Wood for reaching out to Hongdui, highlighting issues with the original. And likewise credit to Hongdui for taking the recommendations, implementing them where possible, and even crediting Hooked on Wood for it on the tool. Can you think of many other companies that would do that? As ever with Hongdui, it's an impressive looking tool, machined exquisitely that works very well, giving you all the variety of marking, layout and drilling options you see here. You could even use the drill guides in Trammel mode giving you a circle of holes, whatever your reason for that might be, but you know, with such a combination tool, you have options. These options do come at a price mind you, so let's talk about that. This MT-2465 Pro combination T-square is currently priced at £124.21. It does say it carries £20 and 9p shipping, but then it also says on orders over £40 there's free shipping, so that charge should be null. So it's not cheap. It is however premium, feature packed and generous in length. If you want just a cheap T-square, well, they exist on Banggood too. This is something very different. Think for example that being 650mm, this has 650 holes drilled in each side at 1mm increments, let alone all the other machining involved. That's a whole lot of machining for the money, so it's actually incredible value. It is available with imperial or metric scale on the rule, and there are also guide sets available as extras or spares. These include not only the marking guides, but also imperial and metric drill guides. You can even buy just a set of new bushings. For £76.66, but with nearly £30 postage, is the MT-2465 original, the non-pro version. This has one marking and one drilling guide only, though the latter still has 4 bushing sizes. It only seems to be available in metric, but looking at it, I can't see anything to suggest you couldn't add the extra guides to it as need or budget allowed. I'd maybe message Hongdui or Banggood to ask and double check that, but that could be a good way to save a few quid on initial outlay. Another way to save a few quid initially could well be to wait until June the 11th through to June the 19th of this year, 2024, as Banggood are having a sale then, and I'm told many, if not all of the woodworking tools will be included in that. If you have any in your basket or wish list, between the 11th and the 19th could well be the dates to check out. I've looked at some neat tools from Banggood this year, whose reviews you'll find on my channel. All could be worth a look during the sale dates if you've maybe been pondering buying one. From Hongdui, tools like the KM17 Pro router plane, the HD KS22 mitre fence and or the HD MG21 mitre gauge. Also the HD19 half gauge, which has proved very useful around the shop. I also really like this Enjoy Wood dowel maker I looked at recently. Watch my video for some tips for use if you're interested in one. Finally, the large 16-inch triangle, which also featured in this video. A pretty cost-effective way of getting hold of such a large alley triangle already, hopefully even more so during the sale period. So it might not be for everyone's budget this T-square, but regardless, I hope you've enjoyed a look at this premium T-square offering from Hongdui. Any questions or comments welcome below, please like if you did, sub if you aren't already, and as ever, if you made it this far, thanks for watching.